Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Burn the Corporate Fiction, one of the very few channels that presents solutions instead of just telling you what the problem is. I see we have Make Stupid People Famous in here already. One of our favorite moderators. Thank you for always being punctual. Good to see you, man. I hope everybody had an excellent Christmas or whatever you celebrate. I'm Anglo-American Christian, so it's Christmas for me. And Happy New Year, right? So tonight, well, first, for those of you that ordinarily watch my channel for the law exclusively, last weekend we took a foray into another, what the normies call conspiracy. Well, conspiracy means conspiracy. It's a plot to do something, but they think it means fake. And we took a look at the final experiment and expressed our views on that. We took our bright light of analysis and we shined 80 characters around that situation. The reason that I even have things like that on this channel is because there are no separate conspiracies. There is only the conspiracy. Okay, it's a multifaceted attack. Okay, an octopus, if you will, right? That they're accosting us on so many fronts, all with the same goal in mind, which it is the opinion of this channel, and I feel like after tonight we will have certainly shown you to almost a certain degree that is the case. They must destroy or hide biblical cosmology, but that's not what tonight's episode is about. That is why we covered what we did last night. It is, however, why there is always an attack on a person, an individual's relationship with their creator, which is why in the thumbnail tonight, you guys will notice I had a Bible and a sword. Now, I'm not going to get preachy, and I'm definitely not a Bible thumper, but as we get into the Magna Carta tonight, you're going to realize that each system of law is entirely dependent upon like the original systems of what we call law, not admiralty, not statute, not code, but when we're talking about law, it's dependent upon essentially the Abrahamic religion. I actually have much to the point of that, I have something to show you guys just to start this off as we wait for people to come in here. I don't want to get into it until, I want to give it about 5-10 minutes, see who's going to initially come in here so they don't miss some very important beginning bits of this presentation, because every bit of it is one thing is going to lead into another, is going to lead into another. I'm intentionally focusing on not going off on different tangents because everything's interrelated, and I know that I go off on, I never fully explain one thing on some streams, and I just keep going from one thing to another because everything's so interrelated. Well, tonight, I have set this stream up to intentionally focus on creating a line from point A to point Z, showing you the Magna Carta from its creation, right, to the present day in my very own home state of Michigan. And it is in yours if you're in the United States. And guess what? Even if you're not in the United States, it is still the basis for the administration of your trust, the current form of slavery that the world finds itself in. And the reason that this is tonight's presentation is because I'm back. I finally got all my stuff off of my SD card. I have my paperwork. I am almost complete with it. I've almost completed it. And once I get that filed on the record in the county, that's it. It's game over. You have absolute claim over. I have absolute claim over my estate. And anybody, even right now, they're going to have great difficulty in trying to charge me for anything unless I hurt somebody. Right. But after you claim your estate, it's over with. It's done. And the reason I want to present the Magna Carta tonight is because it is the origin. It's the double-edged sword of how they are able to administer your trust. It created liberty for the barons. It created freedom, the Great Charter of Liberty for the barons, because the barons knew the law. If you know not the law, or you are not self-sufficient, then the Magna Carta actually opens the door for your entire property to be escheated, which means for it to be taken under the jurisdiction of the court or the crown, right? And administered with you being treated as essentially an infant beneficiary of that estate, which is no good, because like going to jail is a benefit. We're going to get into all that stuff, but I want to show you this, much to the point of everything being based on the common law, the actual law, the original basic foundation from which admiralty springs, from which civil law springs, from which obviously probate springs, right? And of course, from which uniform commercial code ultimately springs. Of course, it is the farthest removed because now it has it has no basis on any kind of actual divine law, and it's just the enforcement, the cold enforcement of contracts and agreements. And so I'm going to show you how they moved you out of the original and brought you here. But much to that point, and me saying that it's based on one of the Abrahamic religions, while we're waiting for people to filter in, I'll show you an example of this actually. And what I mean by one of the Abrahamic religions is, I mean it's based on each form of what people would call actual law, that are the common practices of the people, generally are based on, from everything I can find, one of the Abrahamic religions. So like a parallel to common law would be Sharia law, which has nothing to do with common law, by the way, at all. It's just, it is their religious law. And everybody has to realize that law actually starts with the priest class anyways. So even way back before we get into like the spread of Abrahamic religions and stuff in the Western part of the world, we can look at the Roman temples, like the coins. And of course it's attached to the money as well. The coins, the currency was minted with the head of the god or goddess whose temple issued the currency, right? And those priests and priestesses of those temples were essentially lawgivers and lawyers, right? So, or the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it's always been the priest class. We're really going to understand that after tonight, whether you want to believe it or not, whether you're an atheist or not, doesn't matter to me, because it's in law, it's in documentation, and it's how things are being done right now, whether you choose to believe it or not. So let me show you this little tidbit as we wait for people to filter in here, because I don't want to so much get onto that spirituality, but you can't really talk about law without delving into the realm of the spiritual. So we're going to have a little preliminary so people understand exactly what law is. I'm going to teach you what law is, actually, and that's going to help you immensely, what law actually is. But first, let's watch this little clip, because this is insane. Couldn't believe I seen this, while we wait for people to join us, or if they're going to. Let's see. All right.
You wouldn't have any other option.
Let me start this over.
One day we can have a Muslim majority nation here in Canada, right in your face.
We have Canadian law here, and you say that you want Sharia law to displace Canadian law. That doesn't sound very respectful.
In majority, you wouldn't have any other option. Go to your queen and tell her to change the laws.
Change the laws to what, sir? To Sharia law?
No, change the laws to not allow any more.
So what he just said is, if you end up with a majority of Muslims in Canada, you have no choice but to change your law to Sharia law, because Muslims can only follow, well, those Muslims, the ones that follow Sharia law, can only follow Sharia law, right? So what he's saying is, no, we don't want to take over your law. We're just saying that if we end up exceeding the population you have of Native Canadians, then you will have no choice but to adopt our law, because that is the law of our faith. Okay. Crazy stuff that's even anything that Canada's going through. And much to the credit of this guy, actually, he says, what I'm telling you is, tell your queen, don't change the law to Sharia law, change the law to stop letting Muslims over here. He said that, not me on YouTube. I'm not saying that. This Muslim guy just said it. Okay. So very interesting, right? Let's watch the rest. It's only a few seconds, 16 more
Muslims
seconds.
to come to Canada. We owe our allegiance and our loyalty first and foremost to our religion, not to the queen. To be honest, when I went for my so-called oath, I was silent. I didn't say anything. It was your responsibility to make sure you got it out of me. So when I didn't say anything, I'm not. One day we can have a Muslim majority nation here in Canada, right in your face.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, so I hope that kind of illustrates a little bit of and here's the thing about this. They can never assimilate either. People who in that situation can never assimilate in the same way they would never be able to assimilate into our country, or we would never even allow them to originally into our republic under common law. right? So, because well, we'll get into that later. But let's say hi to some of the people that have joined us so far, and see who we have, and then I will start this presentation. Let me stop the screen real quick. All right, so far we have, of course, I said make stupid people famous. Always good to see you, man. Thank you for being here. Gary, son of Mick, or Jerry. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Jerry or Gary, but you are a regular here, and I'm very glad to see you. Ulick, good to see you, brother. Brad and Tasha, Mike Smith, good to see you. I don't know if it's Brad and Tasha or just Brad or Tasha, but good to see whichever one or both of you. Mike Smith, let's see here. Good to see you, buddy. And then that Mike Finnan, good to see you, brother. And that looks to be who DJ Spin, good to see you, brother. Very good to see you. Yeah, and that looks like who we have so far that has entered this stream. So let's get into this. The very first thing I'm going to present to you is an understanding of the law, just a basic understanding, nothing too in depth. And I'm going to present this by using a treatise on the law of American administration from 1889, I want to say it is. And what American administration is administration is purely a trust term. So when you hear about the Biden administration, the Trump administration, any kind of administration, the administration of your company, your corporation, whatever, all that is the management of a trust. It is purely a trust term every single time you hear it. So what a treatise on the law of American administration means is it means a treaty on the American law of trusts, essentially, and how they're administered by the court. So how does something end up under administration? All right, so let's go through a few basic terms here, okay? You have, in a trust, you have a executor, right? And this is a pure trust, a trust created by a will of the deceased. The deceased left a will, and this is a pure trust, what I'm going to explain initially. Okay, this is a private trust outside of the courts. The court has nothing to do with it, or should have nothing to do with it, right? Which is not necessarily where we're at today, but which is how it is under common law. It's created by will. The executor is appointed by will, the will of the person who's deceased. And it's all outside of the court. The executor makes sure that the duties of the trust are carried out and that all of the property is conveyed to its proper place and placed under the care of each person that it's supposed to. And if the person who's supposed to inherit the property, being the heir, is not of age, then the executor will administer the trust until the heir comes of age. Okay, so that's a perfect trust or a normal trust. Now, you have an administrative trust. Now, how does that come about? What happens is the deceased dies without a will, which is called intestate. Okay, so when I say dies intestate, that means dies without leaving a will. Now, if you die without leaving a will, right, your property escheats. Now, escheat, it escheats to the state to be administered until either your heirs come of age, right, or until it's given to the nearest family member, or if there is nobody to claim it, it stays under the administration of the state. These days, originally under common law, it was supposed to go to auction. Your estate was supposed to go to auction and be auctioned off and returned back into the hands of the people. That's how it's originally supposed to happen. So in a normal trust created by will, there is no administrator. There is an executor who administrates. So in a forced trust, which is one where there is no will, and an intestate trust, then the administrator is the executor, but you don't call the court the executor. You call him the administrator. You don't call the judge the executor. He's the special administrator, because an executor can only be appointed by will. Okay, so you have the in a perfect trust, you have the executor, right, appointed by will. You have the trustee charged with carrying out the duties and obligation and performing the obligations of the trust, and the executor makes sure that happens. And then you have the heir or beneficiary until he becomes an heir. Okay, in the intestate will, the one that escheats to the state, you only have an administrator because there is no executor, and that administrator is appointed by the government or the court or the crown, depending on what country you're in, right? And you have trustees, and then you have a beneficiary. And now the situation that we're in today is there is no ability to be an heir unless you force it, unless you go and you do what I'm going to explain is the solution, which is what we must do. So with that, I'm sure all of you are very confused because it took me years to actually understand that and get it. And it took a historical study of the Magna Carta and the history of common law to truly understand how this is being done and how a trust operates. Okay. So like, for instance, the federal government's always been a trust, but I said, I'm not going down rabbit holes. So let me start with this American law of administration, right, which is talking specifically about trusts. And we're going to share the screen. We're going to come over here to this. And now bear with me. We're going to do a little bit of heavy reading, but I'm going to explain it. And this is a necessary prerequisite before we ever get into the Magna Carta. You have to understand what law is. This man wrote, I forget the author's name, but this lawyer, of course, he hid some things as lawyers are wont to do, but he very, very accurately describes what law is and how it is basically intimately intertwined in an inseparable way with property and your right to property. So let's check this out. The acquisition of property, section 1. Can you guys read this? Let me know in the chat if you can read this in case somebody's watching afterwards and wants to pause and read it themselves. You guys see this okay, or do we need to go a little bit closer here? Everybody good? All right, let me know if you can see it. So the acquisition of property. My property is that which is mine. That only is mine which I acquire, hold, and dispose of by my will. This is important, okay? It is my will. So this goes back to will. What is will? Who can even tangibly quantify will? What is it? What is a will, right? Just think about that for a little bit. I'm not going to attempt to define it for you, but it's your intention and you're carrying out an action of wanting to do something, right? Like to will, right? Ancient. It's the way that we're created in the image of God. So it is my will which determines the acquisition of a thing by me, whether originally by reducing it to possession and thus making my property that which was no one's property before. So what he's saying is that it is your will that creates property, okay? So you reduce the possession by making it yours, and you do that by will, and you can only do that if it was no one else's property before. Or by contract, by which a thing becomes mine through the concurrence of my will with that of its former owner. Okay, that's what a contract is. It's a concurrence of wills and an exchange of property, generally, right? Yeah, well, no, that's just it. It's a concurrence of wills and exchange of property, right? Since I cannot, let's see here, we're right here. Since I cannot rightfully acquire the property of another without his consent, that is, without his free will, it is obvious that the will of the original owner is a necessary element in my ownership. So you cannot acquire the property of another. You cannot violate their will, is what he's getting at, which is that's what a crime is. It's just purely can be defined as the violation of another's will. We're not talking about statutory. We're not talking about the violation of a code. We're not talking about a violation of a contract, which in a way, sometimes it could be. We're talking about actual crimes where there's a victim. What it truly can always be boiled down to is a violation of another's will. Okay, and what he's saying is that the contract is necessary since I cannot make someone else's property my property without a contract, without a concurrence of both of our wills coming together and deciding that this property is going to be mine under whatever conditions are stipulated by the other person whose will is necessary in the conveyance. Okay, so that's why the government always needs you to engage in contract with them in order to acquire your property or come under administration through presumption, which is why they chose that route. Along with the contractual, they'd use that to a degree, but primarily it's presumption. I'm going to show you this because what I'm going to read the Magna Carta out of is the Michigan Compiled Laws of 1929. It is the very first origin of jurisdiction for Michigan to be able to blend the jurisdictions because they are using the administration of trust. So I'm not even going to go to some old obscure website or anything, some random translation. It's coming right out of the Michigan Compiled Laws, guys. That's how this is going to go down tonight. All right. And I have so much stuff. I got Set the KV Act. I got old Michigan revised statutes from the 1800s. I got Virginia revised statutes from the 1800s. I've got organic acts of the territories. And you're going to notice all of this is going to reflect and almost exactly repeat the Magna Carta, which means that common law that was established by Magna Carta maintained and it remained intact for over 800 years. Or I'm sorry, it'd be like 607 at that point, but we're still here now where it's the foundation of what they're doing. So over 800 years in this common law, they can't get rid of it. And the funny thing about why they can't get rid of it is because what this author is expressing is ancient and unwritten in its origin. And the very first time it was ever written down was in the Magna Carta. All right, because it used to be considered an abomination to write the law prior to the conquering of England in 1066, which we'll get to shortly. But let's focus back on this. So the contract is necessary because you need a concurrence of wills for the property of another person to become your property without violating the law. Okay? Common law, which is based on natural law. You cannot violate anyone else's will. Okay, so and so we'll read this again. Since I cannot rightfully acquire the property of another without his consent, that is, without his free will, it is obvious that the will of the original owner is a necessary element in my ownership and in the ownership of anyone who may lawfully acquire it after me, and remains operative until the property has lost its character as such by voluntary abandonment, which he means has lost its character as property and just becomes part of the natural appurtenances of the world, right? So when you acquire property, it's considered a devolution, because it's already in its more perfect state until you acquire it and alter it. And that's actually considered a devolution from the state in which God had placed that property. So they actually call it devolution under common law. So it says, by my free will, my own free will, I may abandon my property, whereupon it ceases to be such and relapses into the condition of res nullius, which means it's nobody's property, right? Subject to become property by the sole will of any person who acquires it. Okay, so abandoned property, another term for abandoned property is res nullius. And so Gary Son of Mick says, I personally believe we are facing a new CQV Act, Set the KV Act, which, if it goes ahead, will lock us away from our estate forever. And that is very astute, because that's exactly what they are attempting to do with the digitalization of everything, and by converting currency from even just the debt note contract form of currency to a currency based on data that you provide, right? And then we'll get into that if we have time tonight, because Bill Gates has got a patent where they can mine cryptocurrency using your body's activity, and that opens a world for some. That's a dark speculative world right there, potential theoretical world. But so let's get through this a little bit more, right? So I hold or use a thing which is mine at will. Okay, of course, it's common sense. Matter is unfree. Think about that. I.e., it has no will. It does not belong to itself. Neither right nor duty can be predicated of a mere thing. Its quality is to offer resistance. It is therefore negative to my will. My will, in realizing itself, overcomes this resistance and subjects the thing to its purposes, changing its form, destroying and consuming it. So that which is mine is thus a part of my personality of me, insofar as its end and purpose of existence is the satisfaction and realization of my will, and to serve it for its purposes as my bodily limbs serve me, right? And this is the most important part, guys. Stick with me. I know this is heavy, okay? But he says will, he says will then is the essence of property. Without it, there is none. Hence, that from which I have withdrawn my will, which I have abandoned, ceases to be my property and becomes, as we have seen, res nullius, the appropriation of which by another is no violation of my right, because it is no collision with my will. So what is property? Property is the ultimate realization of your will, and your right to your property, okay, determines your status, which is actually status is where the word estate comes from, right? Or vice versa, I forget. But either way, status and estate are intimately related, because your status is your relationship to your property. Do you have absolute title to your property? Do you have absolute control over your property? If you do not, that means somebody else controls and has title to your estate and your will. Period. That's it. And that is the essence of slavery. So let's see if I can find. There is one part in here where he says, and I should have looked for it prior to, he says the sphere of the law, there it is, here it is. It says the law recognizes and deals with property insofar as it recognizes and deals with the will of the owner, realized or externalized therein. For the sphere of the law is the spiritual. Okay, guys, this was a common understanding for all the atheists and everybody listening to this. This was common understanding in the 1800s amongst jurists, which means law professionals, law scholars, right? Jurists. The sphere of the law is entirely spiritual. Okay, right? So it operates upon and through the will alone, which is something that cannot be quantified or identified or measured. It is a divine gift in the first place, your will. And your realization and creation of property, okay, is a direct expression of your will. It is the most perfect expression of your will. You acquire something as property to serve your will, as, like he said, your bodily limbs serve your will, and grabbing a drink out of the fridge or throwing something away or, touching someone affectionately, whatever the case may be. You will your bodily limbs to do something, but they were already your property. So you acquire property, everything you own, your house, your furniture, your cars, which actually you don't own any of it. It's all under administration. These are all the realization of your will. What do I mean by realization? You are making real, externalizing, making manifest your will in the form of property. So now, let me take a few questions before we get to the Magna Carta. That's what I wanted to cover as my preamble. We've got some people popping in, popping out. I know this stuff gets heavy. So let me know what questions you guys have and see if I can answer them before we move on to the Magna Carta. Because I'm going to try to keep this stream tight and digestible tonight. As digestible as this stuff can be, right? So let's see what we got here. Any questions? Anyone? All right. Without further ado, let me open up the Magna Carta. Just bear with me. Boom. Now I want you guys to know, this is the Magna Carta from 1215.org, but now this, let's see where you at. No. Where did I open it up? It's in one of my, right here. This is from the compiled laws of the state of Michigan, 1929. Now, I'm going to get into why this is at the very beginning of the compiled laws. At some point in the near future, it should start to become apparent to you. But because people squabble, yes, please do that. If there is any questions, like make stupid people famous says, please put all questions in all caps to make it easier to find. I'm using dual screens this evening to make it easier to see your guys' comments. And if I don't answer it the first time, just copy and paste it again, because I will be looking, but I will also be reading. So there's a lot of history that goes into understanding why the Magna Carta came about. Actually, I'm going to play the first part of a video so you guys can understand like the gravity of what we're in. We'll see if we have a couple more people dropping, because I feel like after several other streams that are going on right now that people are going to jump in And people actually that join a stream early on rarely go back and rewatch it from the beginning. I do not personally a lot of times. And there's all that I just presented, and this that I'm about to present, it's highly important. So let me show you guys this little video real quick, and then we'll get into this. Okay, here we go. These same people that we're about to listen to a recording about these are the same families, the same bloodlines that are behind the Magna Carta in the first place. So listen to this for a second here.
The question of how and why the United Nations is the crux of the great conspiracy to destroy the sovereignty of the United States.
Okay, hold on. We got a question real quick. So Scott NYC says, what would be considered a dying desire? That's your will. So if you don't have the opportunity to actually put it into a will. So everything that I read in that treatise from on the law of American administration is the exact reason why it is the law. It is considered irresponsible, dishonorable, and in some cases unlawful to not leave a will when you die. But people these days have no idea, because they have no idea of that you're supposed to have a house and an estate. You are supposed to be the very first political subdivision of the state itself. Okay. And you're sovereign above it in the republic. And I can prove it. I'll prove all of it. But you're absolutely sovereign in the republic above it. And you're supposed to have a house, a seal, and an estate. Okay. And once you build all of that up, that's so important that it's considered dishonorable, irresponsible, and in some cases unlawful, if you don't leave anything to your wife and children, to not leave a will and just allow your estate to be escheated by the state or go to waste, which is exactly why they escheat the estate, because no property shall ever go to waste. And this is one of the fundamental maxims of law. Okay, guys? So let's listen. I hope I answered your question. And there is actually, so like if you're right about to die and you have not added something that you just thought of in your will, there is actually there is a term for it, but you can tell a witness and the witness can vouch for you that this was your dying wish. And that's actually, it was accepted under certain circumstances in common law as well. So, but that also has potential for corruption, obviously. So let's listen to this for a second, see if anybody else piles in, and then we'll get to the Magna Carta. All right.
States and the enslavement of the American people within a UN one world dictatorship is a complete and unknown mystery to the vast majority of the American people. The reason for this unawareness of the frightening danger to our country and to the entire free world is simple. The masterminds behind this great conspiracy have absolute control of all of our mass communications media, especially television, the radio, the press, and Hollywood. We all know that our State Department, the Pentagon, and the White House have brazenly proclaimed that they have the right and the power to manage the news, to tell us not the truth, but what they want us to believe. They have seized that power on orders from their masters of the great conspiracy. And the objective is to brainwash the people into accepting the phony peace bait, to transform the United States into an enslaved unit of the United Nations one world government. Is that our so-called leaders in Washington, whom we elected to safeguard our nation and our Constitution, are the betrayers, and that behind them are a comparatively small group of men men whose sole objective is to enslave the whole world of humanity in their satanic plot of one world government. Now, as a matter of further intelligence,
Sorry, guys. What I was going to say, I muted as I do normally during recordings. I got to get better at that. I'm not a producer, guys, just a researcher, law, jurist. But what I was saying is that the very people who ratified the Constitution are the people who betrayed you. This was the plan the entire time. I'm going to prove this tonight. I told you guys I was going to do a stream on this. That is tonight's stream. Secondly, it's funny how he's talking about the satanic conspiracy, right? And everybody so readily accepts and will regurgitate that this is a satanic plot while ignoring what that implies. It 100% is, and it can only be done through the law. What created NASA? The law, right? What created the banking system? The law, right? What is UCC? It is a codification of statute based on the law of administration. All of it goes back to law. There is no conspiracy that does not stem from a manipulation of law. There's not one. I challenge anybody to bring me one. Sorry about the silence. It's not, the audio's not freezing. It's poor production value from a non-producer who's trying to get better.
A term used by the FBI. Let me clarify the meaning of the expression, he is a liberal. The enemy, meaning the one world conspirators, have seized upon that word liberal as a cover-up for their activities. It sounds so innocent and so humanitarian to be liberal. Well, make sure that the person who calls himself a liberal or is described as a liberal is not in truth a red.
A communist. Yeah.
Now then, this satanic plot was launched back in the 1760s when it first came into existence under the name of the Illuminati. This Illuminati was organized by one Adam Weishaupt, born a Jew, who was converted to Catholicism and became a Catholic priest, and then, at the behest of the then newly organized House of Rothschild, defected and organized the Illuminati. Naturally, the Rothschilds financed that operation. And every war since then, beginning with the French Revolution, has been promoted by the Illuminati, operating under various names and guidelines.
So all the various revolutions in the Middle Ages are a direct result of a battle between the two streams of law that the Magna Carta drew a hard line for. So, now that I know I gave you a little teaser, right? And I guess, this is who we're going to have for the time being. So let's get into it. The funny thing is like I told you guys before, is that the common law was considered an abomination to write down the common law. Okay. So what happened was you had essentially in England, you had these, what would amount to counties, or they were called hundreds, right? But not quite as big as what we consider counties, but basically like a village, right? Where all the men would get together at an annual meeting and they would hold court, recite the law, and handle any problems between the people, self-governance, right? And then the Vikings came in. Of course, you had a king in England, okay? And there's much more history. We're not going into the history of England, but like, for instance, Rome had come in and tried to conquer prior, just after the death of Christ, and they were fought back by the Celts, and then they built the Hadrian Wall, founded London, and London has been a Roman city-state ever since. Even in the Magna Carta, we're going to find a concession allowing London to retain its sovereignty, okay? And then a little on down the road, but still the people were self-governed, right? Especially amongst the tribes that were not under London's control, et cetera, et cetera. And they were self-governing through, the names changed, things, hundreds, so on and so forth, right? And then the Vikings came in and they introduced the concept of the power of the people, that the king's right to rule was derived from the subject, from the people, and not from the royalty itself. And that further entrenched common law in the understanding that, you know, that the king didn't necessarily make law, the king regulated commerce. That's it. So you had this going on all the way till 1066. In 1066, William the Conqueror came in. He was a Norman. He was the Norman Terror, right? And he came in, he conquered England. And when he conquered England, he introduced what was called the Domesday Book, which is spelled Domesday, which I also find interesting. But if you guys looked at it, is the Domesday Book. And this was a book of registry. And so what had formerly been the people's property, right, are now forced to be the barons. I'm more specifically talking about, because peasants and people who worked the land, they never had property really. They, you know, they were freemen, but they still owed a portion of what they harvested to their lords because the land was not theirs. And ultimately, you know what I mean? This all went back to the king and stuff, but you're a freeman. And so now you have to register, the barons had to register their property to the king, right? And when you register something, you split the title, which means you're giving ownership of it over to the king. And then the king allows you to use it for a fee, which is what is. So William the Conqueror introduced feudalism into England. Okay. And feudalism is where the ownership in a thing is vested in, say, the government or the crown, and the use of it is vested in the people for a fee. So, like when you hear about barons and dukes and knights and duchies and duchesses, when you hear about all these things, the people themselves were not those things. It was the title of the land, that if the person held the title to the land, they held that title of baron, duke, duchy, knight, whatever, right? Because it all goes back to the property. It's the property that they're able to create all these legal layers of titles and identification on. It always has been. And let me know if I'm confusing you guys, questions in all capitals. But anyway, so William the Conqueror comes in and puts the Norman yoke on the English people, is what they call it, right? Forces them to register their property. And another thing he does is he splits the courts, and he splits it into a temporal and a spiritual court. And the spiritual court he gives to the priest class he brought with him. So this is a very quick summary. I'm not going to get too deep into it. Now, the spiritual court, also known as ecclesiastical court, which is now today's probate court, had power over life, death, and inheritance. Okay, so births, deaths, marriages, and inheritance after death. And so what happened is, now you're during the time of the Crusades. So these barons would go out, fight wars, right, and die. And I'm just using baron as a general term, but that means knight or anyone else who held a fief, right? They go out and they fight and they die on the battlefield, and say their heir was not of age, right? Then the estate comes under the administration of the ecclesiastical court, and the ecclesiastical court was pillaging the estate and would oftentimes steal the estate or give it to somebody else, one of their buddies. And so it took 1215 or 1066 to 1215 for the barons to get sick of this, or so we're told. That's the story on its face. So we are now going to get into the Magna Carta, and we're going to start explaining the stuff. And I've given enough time. We've actually lost some people, so they're probably not interested in all the extra shit they want to hear about the Magna Carta. So let's get into it. We're going to pull up. Where the hell is my Magna Carta at? Because it's just under Michigan compiled law. So there we go. All right. Let me share this. And we're going to zoom in. Let me know if you guys cannot see it. Wow, that's it? That's all the zooming I get on that? Holy smokes. Very inefficient. Hathi Trust is a great resource for... Oh, wow. It really zoomed in on that. All right, we're going to use my other PDF because Hathi Trust is annoying, but we can, if anybody doubts, it's in the Michigan compiled law, so we're going to use this one. All right, that still hasn't caught back up, so let's try this again. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties, new computer. Okay, here we go. So John, who was the king at the time, right, a descendant of William the Conqueror, by the grace of God, King of England, Lord of Ireland, Duke of Normandy and Aquitaine, right? Duke of Normandy, that's important because that's who came in and conquered. The Count of Anjou province in France, to his archbishops, bishops, abbots, earls, barons, justices, foresters, sheriffs, stewards, servants, and to all his officials and loyal subject. Greeting, right? So this is John. Well, so the barons wrote this and forced John to sign it. Okay, so what happened was they cornered him at the battlefield called Runnymede, and they had already drafted this up, and they forced him to sign it because they were tired of their property getting stolen. So know that before God, for the health of our soul and those of our ancestors and heirs, to the honor of God, the exaltation of the Holy Church, and the better ordering of our kingdom, at the advice of the Reverend Father Stephen, Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England, and Cardinal of the Holy Roman Church, Henry, Archbishop of Dublin, William, Bishop of London, etc., etc. I get all the way down here. So here, first, that we, so the king always refers to himself as we. Even though the barons wrote this, they wrote it in a way that it was like the king wrote it. And the barons always refer to themselves as we. We have granted to God, and by this present charter have confirmed for us and our heirs in perpetuity, which is called a addendum clause. And this was what was originally on the land patents in the United States. Okay, so when you received the land patent from the president, it said for so-and-so and their heirs in perpetuity, which means forever, right? That the English church shall be free. So the very first thing they needed to do to establish their system of law was have their own church, which is what I mean is that all law must stem from a priest class. It must stem from a divine authority. And you go, well, how do we have UCC? How do we have all this stuff? Because none of that is law, okay? Those are expressions of statutes created by circumstances in law, like you being an infant and under the administration of the government. So, and shall have its rights undiminished and its liberties unimpaired, that we wish this to be observed. So the church shall have its rights undiminished and its liberties unimpaired. That we wish this so to be observed appears from the fact that our own free will, well, there's the will again, right? Before the outbreak of the present dispute between us and our barons, we granted and confirmed by the Charter of Freedom, or by charter, the freedom of the church's elections, a right reckoned to be the greatest necessity and importance to it, and caused this to be confirmed by Pope Innocent III. This freedom we shall observe ourselves and desire to be observed in good faith by our heirs in perpetuity. So let me translate that first. What that translates to me is, one, they were already in dispute with the king about this stuff, right? About the misuse of their property by the ecclesiastical courts. They were already having issues with the king. In fact, we're going to find out here later in this document that the king had jailed some people. The only reason they were able to corner the king is because the Pope or the church had decided to leave on a conclave conveniently and leave the king unprotected, even though all of this strife was taking place right now. Okay, left the king unprotected to be cornered by the barons to sign this paperwork. Okay, and that's why they're also saying that this, we're doing this through the church, with the church, we're kind of going against the church in a certain way. We're not accepting the ecclesiastical law, but we want you to know that we respect you and all. This is an entire setup, right? And so let's get into it. To all free men of our kingdom, we have also granted for us and our heirs forever all the liberties written out below, and have and to have and to keep for them and their heirs of us and our heirs. So when he says for them and their heirs, us and our heirs, them and their heirs mean the peerage, the baronage, and the knights, and what are considered the sovereigns of England. And when he says us and our heirs, that means the king and his family. Okay, so his princes and princesses, or his, whoever, direct family, even though they were all family, which is the great trick when you start talking about the Magna Carta. We'll get into that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. If any earl, baron, or other person that holds lands directly of the crown for military service shall die, and at his death his heir shall be of full age and owe a relief. So look at this. Immediately goes into this. Okay, immediately goes into this is about inheritance. Okay, and what a relief is basically a fee, right? Let's get into it. So holds land directly of the crown. And remember when I said, so basically what the king did was he parceled out land under titles to basically extended family members, which were known as peerage, royal bloodline. And they took these titles, but they would have to pay a fee or a relief. A relief, I believe, if I remember correctly, and this is really old law, but it's like a relief is for like a marriage or a knighting or any of that. Those are a fee for the name for a fee for one of those things. The heir shall have his inheritance on payment of the ancient scale of relief. That is to say, the heir of heirs of an earl shall pay 100 for the entire earl's barony. The heir of heirs of a knight for hundreds, right? At the most for an entire knight's fee. And any man that owes less shall pay less in accordance with the ancient usage of fees. So basically he's saying once they inherit their land, they come of full age, they'll pay the fee according to a scale. It doesn't accrue while you're waiting for them to come of age, right? And then but if the heir of such person is underage in award, when he comes of full age, he shall have his inheritance without relief or fine. So that means if the relief is completely paid up and the heir is underage, then the relief does not accrue while you're waiting for the heir to come of age. But notice how this is all about inheritance, coming of age, et cetera, et cetera. So what are you? Somebody put in the chat, what are you if you're not of age? What are you considered at law? I want to see who gets this. Go ahead, shoot. And I want people that are watching this, if you made it this far, afterwards on the internet, to just go ahead and chew through it while somebody answers it in my chat. Who here knows what you are considered at law if you are not of age? Infant? Yep. Unidozer, come through in the clutch. Anybody else got some? Infant, make stupid people famous. Good, good. And infant, Scott. Yes, good. Chattel. Well, nowadays, yes, for sure. And I guess in a way back then, an infant, Bullet says, yes, 100%. So you guys got it, right? Let me pop over to this real quick. You guys will find this interesting. This is why they use the Magna Carta as the foundation. You guys will like this. Title 1, USC, Section 8. Person, human being, child, and individual, as including born alive infant. In determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulation, blah, 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 the words person, human being, child, and individual shall include every infant member of the species Homo sapiens who is born alive at any stage of development. What does that mean? What that means is any code, statute, or anything that the government issues that refers to a person, human being, child, or individual, they were talking about an infant. You're an infant in their eyes, and you must necessarily be. They say you're born alive, but now you're an infant. And that gets into the Set the KV Act, which we'll get into in a little bit. But you're an infant, and you must necessarily be so they can administer your estate and use your Social Security to pay for bombs and tanks and whatever else that they need, send money to Ukraine. All that stuff comes out of your trust that they created by mortgaging your estate and the contracts that are produced by the speculation of sweat equity that a state will produce. So not to get too far off track, let's get back here. Jerry Sonamick says Homo sapiens, human, a make-up word. They own infant in the infantry. Yeah, and that's also why they use the term infant for infantry. These are they're under administration. Absolutely. That means they're told what to do, when to do. They are now property. And I guess if you really wanted to break it down, infant is property. Okay. So let's see. So the guardian of the land of an heir who is underage shall take from it only reasonable revenue. So here right there, whoever is administering or who is the guardian of your estate is allowed to take from it revenues, right? Customary dues and feudal services, it says right here. He shall do this without destruction or damage to the men or property. So this is very important. This is why your car yells at you when you're wearing a seatbelt. Okay, so as part of their administration under the law, they have to protect the property. They have to keep the property in good order in case the heir comes and claims it. You guys know what I'm saying? Do you give and any questions, please? All capitals. I really want you guys to ask questions here. This is important stuff. So they must keep the property safe, right? And so that's why you have to have health insurance, right? You have to have car insurance. You have to wear a seatbelt. You have to, all this stuff are literally administrative laws for protecting the property in case the infant comes in, or in case the heir comes and claims the estate, not the infant. The infant cannot, unless he becomes the heir, which is what you're supposed to do. So it says that if, right here, we have given the guardianship of the land to a sheriff or any person answerable to us for the revenues, and he commits destruction or damage, we will exact compensation from him, and the land will be entrusted to two worthy and prudent men of that same fee who shall be answerable to us for its revenues. So it always has to be transferred. When one person wastes the property or goods, it gets transferred to or two other worthy and prudent men of the same fee. And then it continues. So say you're the original man, whatever, right? And you waste the goods. And so they take you under administration. They automatically transfer you to guess who? The judge and the district attorney. Those are the two honorable men, we'll call them, of that fee, is how they're referring to this. So, and then when those judges or whatever are done with you, they just bounce you over to another one. So basically, your estate just bounces from administrator to administrator to administrator to administrator ad infinitum, right? And infinitum, however you want to say it. And so anyways, or to the person to whom we have assigned them. If we have given or sold to anyone the guardianship of such land, and he causes destruction or damage, he shall lose guardianship of it, and it shall be handed over to two worthy and prudent men of that same fee, who shall be similarly answerable to us. This is the judge and the district attorney every time, over and over and over again. Okay. For so long as a guardian has guardianship of such land, he shall maintain the houses, parks, fish, preserves, ponds, mills, and everything else pertaining to it from the revenues of the land itself. So what we're gathering so far is that the most important thing to being able to claim your estate, or how your estate ends up in administration, is you have to be of age. Now, who here knows what of age actually is? Anybody got any suggestions in the comments? I'll give you a few minutes, or not a few minutes, but I'll give you about a minute if you guys want to answer. And so Unidozer, he says we are talking about old law. No, we are not. We are talking about the foundation of the current law. I can prove that. I'm going to prove that. It's actually right here. Let's see if my freaking computer caught up yet. Okay. This is Michigan. Whoops. Gotta try this then. Here, you know what? We'll just we'll refresh the whole page, right? And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna scroll up to the top. So this is Hathi Trust, very good resource. Now this is the first time Michigan attempted to blend all the jurisdictions. So you look over here in the left-hand corner, it says the compiled laws of the state of Michigan, 1929, compiled and arranged and annotated under the Act 389 of 1927, as amended by Act 63 of 1929, which I have the 1929 and all that pulled up here. But basically, if you look at this, all right, let's see here. The very beginning of this, so this is the entire compiled laws, and they're doing this in preparation for the bankruptcy of 1933. That's why they are doing this, and so that they can create a probate code. So this is the table of contents, essentially, and we're going to go up to the top here. So you can see they have to what they did when they compiled it. So you went from a revised statutes of the state of Michigan to Michigan compiled laws. So it used to be called revised statutes all the way until 1929. Now it's called MCL, Michigan compiled laws. And the reason that they had to do that was because they created their order of jurisdiction to pull you into commercial code, because now they don't want to have to specify which jurisdiction it falls under. And I'll show you what they passed to do that, because I have that pulled up for you as well. But I'm sorry, this takes a while to sift through, especially since it takes so long to load, because I'm streaming and have so many pages open at the same time. But if you're interested in seeing this knowledge, I know exactly what I'm talking about, and there's no lawyer on the planet that could prove me wrong. So come on, load it up. There we go. Okay, so you go down here, scroll down, preface, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Then you're going to get to your table of contents. Now check this out. We're just going to zoom in real nice and close on this. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let's see if we can get even closer. I don't want it to freeze up again, but you know, there we go. We won't get greedy. Chapter 1, Magna Carta, pages 2 through 8. Chapter 2, Declaration of Independence, 9 through 11. Chapter 3, Constitution of the United States. Now, it's not the Magna Carta itself that they needed, right, or by itself. It is what has been evolved from the Magna Carta since its creation. Establishment is actually the right word, because you ordain and establish law, because the people are the power. It comes from God, and so it's ordination, ordain. That's why they called the original territory, the law for the original Northwest Territory, the Northwest Ordinance, right? Because it's ordaining it. And this is where the spirituality comes into the law the entire time. People willingly choose to ignore this at their own peril. But the Magna Carta is the very, very first document, because it necessarily must be so for them to administer your estate. Okay, period. So we'll bounce back here. We'll go to this is before Michigan even became a state. All right, this is called the Laws of the Territory of Michigan. What did they do right here? This right here is an act for establishing courts of probate. So what they did was they established probate courts before they even became a state. They did not have to put anything about it in their constitution. There's nothing about it has to be in the federal constitution, because our law was known to be English common law, except for we are all the peerage and there is no king. And so everything that has been evolved and established in common law over the last, so this is 1215 to 600 plus years, right? It's all presumed to be known to be a part of the English common law. So they never actually had to put it in the founding document. And this right here is a smoking gun that the founding law of this country is common law. It's the only way they could grandfather in common law without having to actually go through and create an ecclesiastical jurisdiction. I'm sorry, not grandfather in common law, grandfather in probate, without actually having to go in and create a whole new ecclesiastical jurisdiction. This probate court right here that they created is an extension of the very first ecclesiastical court that William the Conqueror created after he invaded in 1066, or after 1066, right? And the very reason why the barons made this Magna Carta was not to protect the people from the administration of their estates, from this trust indenture. It was to protect the peerage, the royalty. Well, then they concocted later on this ingenious idea: what if we create a nation where all the people are peerage, right? Everyone is peerage, but because they are not royal blood, or they're not actual peerage, they have no idea what the common law is, then we'll just immediately, right after we say, yeah, you're one of the peers, you're free. Oh, but wait, you're a spendthrift. or you're a distracted person, or you're, so look at this. So for establishing the courts of probate, right? So they established the courts of probate in 1927. Then we ratify our Constitution, 1935 or 1835. Then we come over here, right? And the very next thing they do is an act to authorize the judges of probate to grant license to sell the real estate of minors, which are infants, and others, so that the judges of probate in their respective counties may, on representation of any guardian of any minor, idiot, lunatic, non-compos, means mentally incompetent, which if you do not know the law, that for that reason right there is why you need an attorney, right? Somebody to take guardianship over you in the court because you do not know the law. So you are a minor, you're an infant. Okay. I hope I'm making this clear. Idiot, lunatic, non-compos, or distracted person. Like I haven't even looked into a distracted person, huh? Shit, that's all these idiots going around going, I have ADHD, which is just really a lack of mental discipline. But I guess that's exactly what they're talking about. So any of those people, so for any reason they can determine, if people determine that that's what you are and they take you to court and you're unable to prove otherwise, then they can just take your shit. And then the judge can grant a license to such guardian to sell at public auction to the highest bidder or at private sale, as the judge of probate shall consider will be most beneficial to such minor, idiot, lunatic, non-compos, or distracted person, if the judge shall be of the opinion that the sale will be for the interest of such minor. No, it's for the interest of the judge and the guardian and the two lawful discrete men of that fee, as usual, right? Because this is one of the two lawful discrete men of that fee, by the way. Provided that if it shall be made to appear to such judge that said real estate was purchased with the funds of a parent of such, blah, 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 well, the rest of it's irrelevant anyway. That's the point. So what are the very first two things they did? One, before they even became a state, created a probate court to be able to use the ecclesiastical jurisdiction of common law created by the Magna Carta. Two, sheet your property under the presumption that you're not capable of managing it, and then authorize the fucking sale of it. That's what backs the entire securities market we have today. That's how they were able to take your estate and mortgage it to back the Federal Reserve notes and all of the other court-generated securities like bonds and tickets and all coupons, all that stuff. And then not to mention that, but all the other securities issued by the energy companies and everyone else. If you got a power bill in your name, you know, they're subsidized by the government. They're providing a benefit. They get paid from your trust. It's all just one big feasting off of the infant situation we got here. So let me look and see, and I hope that answered your question, Unidozer, because I really went through all that for just you when you asked that old law thing. You know, an attorney said that to me one time, and I said, there's no fucking such thing as old law. And he couldn't argue with me. He's just like, well, you know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean old law? What's old, bro? What are you talking about? There's old statutes, old codes, but there's no such thing as old law. Law is ordained and established. It's not written by a bunch of idiots in suits, a bunch of frickin', you know, kitty diddlers over, you know, in suit. It's not written by them. Okay. It's ordained and established. It's based on divine principles. It necessarily must be always. Right. So with that little foray, and then we get right here. And this is, so they did in 1929. Right. So in 1929, they issued the Michigan compiled laws, and they made sure to put the Magna Carta as the first. Right. They also introduced the tax code they did the tax code in the 1933. Yeah. That when we were bankrupt and all that. So they did this incrementally, bit by bit, so that by 1939, after the bankruptcy, after they removed the gold standard and all that stuff, they created the probate code, which is a huge, and now it's not even law, it's not even statute, it's just the codification of previous statutory provisions, which goes much more in depth on how they can take the property of minors and infants and lunatics and non-compos and spendthrifts and all that stuff. And actually they got so deceptive with it. They're like, well, you know, if you let your doctor leave the room with the baby and you don't express a will for it to be returned to you, then that's considered abandonment at the hospital. And of course, all the hospitals are subsidized, and they're hospitals. They're foundling hospitals. They're meant to escheat the new delivered cargo into the hands of the state to be mortgaged to the United States, to be pledged to the United States, to be mortgaged to the central banking system and the court system. Period. That's it, dude. It's just one big funnel, and it all stems back from where we're going to get back to right now, which is the Magna Carta. Okay. So in this right here, for so long as the guardian has guardianship of such land, he shall maintain the houses, parks, fish, preserves, ponds, everything else pertaining to it from the revenues of the land itself. So that's what they're saying. They're saying that you can take a revenue, or you can take a reasonable fee for the administration of the lands. Of course they do. Guess what? Their reasonable fee is 33%. But we'll get into that another time, right? Because going into how this is expressed today, I just want to lead you up to it being expressed today. Okay, so that you understand this is the origin, and this is why you have to claim your estate. You have to claim it. You have to prove that you're living, that you're of age, and that you're competent, and you know the law, and you do that by filing on the record a declaration of claim, right? A claim of your title and estate. You do that, in which we're going to explain, and I'm almost finished with mine, and other people have already done it successfully and sued judges out of their house and home, right? Which I've proven on this channel. Which is on the Colorado Secretary of State website. Maybe we'll get into it in a little bit if you guys want. But I mean, I've shown it so many times. Like, if you don't believe me, go watch an old episode, or just look up Daniel A. Wazl, Wazlz, right? Colorado on the Colorado Secretary of State UCC liens search engine, and you'll see that judge has an over $6 million bond against him, all of his chattel and property, everything that he owns, because he attempted to unlawfully administer the estate of somebody who had claimed it, period. Right? So that's it. This is the answer. This is how we do this. If we take all of our estates back, they have no money for wars. They have no money for anything. They don't have shit. They have nothing of their own. Everything they are using, everything they were using in the beginning, they borrowed from us, which we willfully gave to them as servants. Now everything they are using, they are forcefully taking from us through presumption administration, by making us stupid, making you forget the law, and then taking control of your estate. You don't know that you're supposed to have a house, that you're supposed to belong to a house as the first political subdivision, which I'll show you guys in a little bit in the Indiana Constitution, actually. You don't realize that you have an estate, right? Period. And all of this stuff it's Old Testament stuff. So anyway. Let's get back to you. I digressed again, right? Do we have any questions? Anybody? No? Before I get back into this, let me know. All caps. They help me see them better, just because they stand out. All right. So when the heir comes of age. Now, what is coming of age? Coming of age means that you are capable of managing the affairs of your estate. So that's why it says born alive infant at any stage of development in Title I, USC Section 8. Because you can be a 50-year-old infant. Doesn't matter. Or you can be a 20-year-old or a 15-year-old who's come of age. Like back in the day, you had like very skilled military officers who are like 15 years old, dude. You know what I mean? Like, so that's not an argument. Now today, like, you're not going to find 15-year-olds like that. They're all children, right? But my point is that the of age to claim your estate is not a number. It's a state of being. Okay, he shall restore to him. So once he comes of age, he shall restore to him, stocked with plow teams and such implements of husbandry as the season demands, and revenues from the land can reasonably bear. So this is a more modern translation. This is not necessarily really an Old English one like I'm used to reading, but I must have pulled up the wrong one. So, but it's the same thing. So yeah, that's exactly right. It says plows and wainages in the Old English translation, because this was originally written in Latin. I don't know if people realize that, but the Magna Carta is originally written in Latin, and must necessarily be so because it was written by essentially by people who know, by clergy. That's it. And all lawful and biblical documents were written in Latin. That was what the whole Reformation was about. It was written in a language that the average person could not understand. So then this goes into heirs may be given in marriage, but not to someone of lower social standing. Before a marriage takes place, it shall be made known to the heirs next of kin. At her husband's death, a widow may have her marriage portion. So this goes in widows protected. We're not going to, I'm not going to go through and bore you guys with all this. It's funny that they actually just outright say this here. It says, if anyone who had borrowed a sum of money from Jews dies before the debt has been repaid. See, it says money lenders in the old English translation of this. And I feel like that's a bit more generous for them. But yeah, essentially money lenders, Jews. And the Jews were actually property of the king back then. And that's why the Magna Carta gets rid of debtor's prison, which I'm pretty sure it does right in here. Because they were exceptionally harsh with their debtors, but they were merchants and they had their own set of laws. It was called Lex Mercatoria. It's merchant's law, right? And they were protected by the king, but they also were not technically freemen because they were property of the king, but they also couldn't do any kind of business for other wealthy people. They could only do business for the king because, I mean, that's their wheelhouse, right? I mean, as we see today, obviously that's their wheelhouse. So this is all about men dying owing money to the Jews and how like the minor, like a minor estate or the minor heir, if he's not of age yet, he cannot be charged interest till he comes of age, and then he's responsible for paying the debt and all that stuff. It's very fair, right? So this one's interesting right here, 13, and I like that it's 13. That's very significant, by the way. Says that the city of London shall enjoy all its ancient liberties and free customs, both by land and by water. We will also grant that all other cities, boroughs, towns, and ports shall enjoy all their liberties and free customs. Now, the reason they put this in here is because the city of London is not London as we know it today. The city of London is what's considered the financial district, which has been a Roman sovereign city-state since I think like 43 AD, somewhere in there, like somewhere in the very early first century of after the death of Christ. Rome was established because they could go no further north, and they were beaten back, and they just established Rome, and that's always been its own thing. So that's why they have to do that. And then again, this goes back to the ancient liberties and free customs. That is common law also, right? So that's the whole point of what common law is. It goes back to a time immemorial. It goes back before anybody can remember who wrote it or why. It's always been the custom and practice of the people. And generally that's respecting divine law, period. Except for when I guess even when it comes to, that's why we still have a couple states in this country to this day in the Republic where you can actually have a duel with somebody to the death. And then the cop just oversees it. And it's still actually on the books. You can do that because that was such an ancient, even going all the way back to before the Magna Carta, such an ancient law, an ancient custom and usage that they couldn't make it unlawful if they wanted to. They can try to put it down on a piece of paper and tell you that it is, but then you know this stuff, you know common law, you know how to use common law, and you say, no, you can't. So in fact, you're trespassing upon my estate, right? You're infringing on my liberties, trespassing upon my estate, which is actually called trespass on the case at common law. And then you take them to court and you sue the shit out of them. And then boom, and that's it. And guess who runs the court? Well, that's going to be a whole other class. I've already done some classes like that, but we can't get off into that rabbit hole tonight. So let me check back, see if there's any questions real quick. Nothing in capital letters, so I imagine we're good. Yeah, make stupid people famous as sign me up with states, right? I did know. I will have to relook. It's VSOF was talking about it also. I think I want to say it's Oregon or Washington, some Western state. I don't know. Look it up, do your research, and let me know which exact states they are. But I do know for a fact that there are a couple states where that duel is still on the books, and that's not bullshit. I just mentioned that tonight offhand, and so I don't have the actual stuff pulled up to prove it, but I know it is, so you can go ahead and just look it up, and you'll find it. To obtain the general, here we go. So the City of London. So yeah, the City of London is to remain its own sovereign city-state. It's like, hey, you guys have been here. We're not going to mess with you. We're not changing anything. Good to go. Again, another nod to Rome, which makes me think that this was actually planned in order to introduce the concept of trusts and administration into common law. And I guess that's my whole point with showing you this tonight, is that this was actually a dubious, in the same way that the Constitution was drafted to give the judicial branch the ability to usurp the sovereignty of the states, like as Jefferson said, like as gravity by day and by night, to usurp the sovereignty of the states. Right. That's what so the Constitution, they created this, the barons and the powers that be created this to be able to usurp the estates of the common folk. And the barons made this to be complicit in doing this with them, which are all the people who run the big corporations, the big philanthropic organizations. They're all descended from these people. Right. Not all of them, but the majority, if they're Western European, they're descended from these people. Okay. And that was their way to get in on the action and make sure they protected their own estates while coming. This is the very basis of the plan for the New World Order, is the administration of your estate. So when we're watching that video on X that we were watching, this is the foundation of the plan for the New World Order. Communism is absolute administration of your estate without any opportunity for returning or reclaiming it. Period. That's what they're trying to set up. But in order to successfully do that, they must digitize everything and remove all knowledge of common law. See, the same reason that Magna Carta is the very first document, the Michigan Compiled Laws, 1929, is the reason why they can never get rid of common law. Instead, they have to found what they're doing on it and then bury it under compiled laws, so that you never go back and learn the original. Wait a minute, how do you even have the ability to tell me what to do with my property in the first place? It doesn't make any sense. I have no contracts with you, right? Or any contract that I made with you was done under misrepresentation of facts, fraud, collusion, or coercion, which vitiates all contracts. So how are you telling me what to do with my estate? And how are you using my estate to borrow money to pay for bombs and tanks and send to other countries? How's that working? Right? They don't want you to ever know that. And then our county courts of record the county court record, or the county record rather, is one form of our court of record. And we can open a court on that record. And that's what you do when you claim your estate, and you turn your declaration of claim into a performance contract, which makes it so if anybody attempts to administer your estate, that they're automatically agreeing to be your trustee and put up a $300 million bond, right? Now you've got them, because now you send them notice of it. You send them notice of it as soon as you get a traffic ticket, whatever the case. You send the judge, you send the officer, you send everybody involved notice of it. And once they disregard it, because they're so stupid, they don't even know the law. Honestly, they're just Goombas, right? And then you take them through the common law administrative process, which I can teach you guys. I'm going to teach you guys. I'm just deciding how I want to structure and organize that portion of the channel. You take them through that administrative process, then you can default them and place liens on their property that way through the Secretary of State, and they're now open to arbitration. And then you can get an arbitration award, which I've already proved has happened and is able to be done. A lawyer, so Ryan 1778 says that a lawyer told him that it's still a debtor's prison. Absolutely, it is still a debtor's prison. Well, all crimes are commercial now. Every crime is commercial. It has to be a debtor's prison. But they also have to maintain the property, as it says here in the Magna Carta, right? It says that right here, for so long, hold on. It says, the guardian of the land of an heir who is under age shall take from it only reasonable revenues, customary dues, and feudal services. This is why the prison warden wants you in his prison. You are his ward. He is the warden. He is now the guardian of the land of an heir who is under age, a minor, an infant, trustee, right? Because they actually don't even recognize you as the heir, just as an infant trustee. And he can take reasonable revenues from your trust, which is what the DOC parcels out to the various corrections departments The Department of Corrections parcels out of your trust their reasonable revenues, customary dues, and feudal services, right? And the warden has to do this without destruction or damage to men or property. So they put you in these cushy little college campus looking like prisons. And I'm not saying that's the case everywhere, but that's generally why prisons in the United States are much better than prisons in Russia or Mexico. You know, so let's see. Any other questions in all caps? Okay, no. So, where were we? We were at, yeah, we went way down. Okay, so to obtain general consent, this is about recourse. So, of course, the king was imposing unreasonable aids and taxes, so they had to put that in. You cannot levy unreasonable taxes. You can't just levy a permanent tax for no reason, et cetera, et cetera. No man shall be forced to perform more service for a knight's fee or other fee holding of land than is due from it. Ordinary lawsuit. So without going through this whole thing, which we can go through when we get to talking about grand juries, because this is also the origin of grand juries, I wanted to point out that this opens the door for the administration of estate of heirs who are not of age and the control of estates who have died intestate. Well, actually, more specifically, the next one does. So we're going to pop forward to this. This is the Set Decay V Act of 1666. So this is the natural progression of what they were trying to do. Now, we have been going for, let's see, about an hour and a half, close to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this video for a second while I take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back and get into the Set Decay V Act of 1666, if you guys don't mind, of course. And I'll just play this while I'm gone so you guys aren't sitting here in the silence.
In the United States, they set up what they called the Council on Foreign Relations, commonly referred to as the CFR. And this CFR is actually the Illuminati in the United States. And its hierarchy, the masterminds in control of the CFR, to a very great extent, are the descendants of the original Illuminati conspirators. But to conceal that fact, most of them changed their original family names to American-sounding names. For example, the true name of the Dillons, Clarence and Douglas Dillon, once Secretary of the U.S. Treasury Department, is Lepowski. There is a similar establishment of the Illuminati in England, operating under the name of the British Institute of International Affairs. There are similar secret Illuminati organizations in France, Germany, and other nations operating under different names. But at all times, the operations of these organizations were and are masterminded and controlled by the internationalist bankers, who in turn were and are controlled by the Rothschilds. Now, just why did the conspirators choose the word Illuminati for their satanic organization? Weishaupt himself said that the word is derived from Lucifer and means holders of the light, using the lie that his objective was to bring about a one-world government to enable those with mental ability to govern the world and prevent all wars in the future. In short, using the word peace on earth as his bait, perhaps the most vital directive in Weishaupt's plan was to obtain absolute control of the press so that all news and information could be slanted, so that the
Okay, thank you guys for being patient. Apologize about that. You know, it's tough sitting here for hours doing a podcast. So I actually just came up with that way that when I need to take a break, I just find a good video like this one to play, take a quick break, and move forward. So let's stop sharing this for a moment. Now, before we get into the Set Decay V Act of 1666, I want to give you a little prehistory so we can close the gap between 1215 and 1666. And of course, so my biggest problem with trying to explain the law to you guys is that there's so much to this, and there's so many centuries upon centuries. I mean, really thousands of years, but centuries upon centuries as far as it regards our current situation of law and history that are prerequisite in understanding how this is being done, why it's being done, and the way to stop it, that I often go down many rabbit holes. And, you know, at the end of the presentation, people are like, you just gave us a bunch of pieces we don't know how to put together, because you bounce from this to bounce to that, bounce to this, bounce to that. So I'm going to stay on track, and we're just going to close the gap quickly between 1215 and 1666. So, of course, this isn't the first set, the KV Act. There was a previous one in, I believe, like 1547 or 1549 by King Henry. And but what had happened is, if you look at the Magna Carta as the organic document to create this system of blended trust and common law. So trust law is Roman, and then common law is English, obviously. And the Magna Carta opened the door to blend that ecclesiastical law in with the common law by saying, okay, you're going to administer the estates of heirs who are not of age and intestate estates and all that stuff. Okay, that's what you want to do. Well, this is how you're going to do it, and we have these rights. So they did that. Naturally, from that point on, there were courts that were created and systems that were created and tried out and discarded. And they eventually ended up setting upon the Court of Wards and Liveries. Okay. And the Court of Wards and Liveries was where an heir, essentially what happened was, if you were the heir of a knight or a baron or something like that, and your father went off, fought, or for whatever reason died before you were of age, then you would be put under the administration of the Court of Wards and Liveries. Now, that's interesting because wards are human liveries, livestock, and liveries are livestock, right? So if you look at old farms and stuff like that, they say liveries and to refer to their cattle. So it's the Court of Wards and Liveries, and that's where the heir would have to go and sue out his livery once he came of age, right? And there are examples of that. There's actually an example of that in the Magna Carta later on, but I want to, like I said, for the sake of brevity, let's continue forward. So they created the Court of Wards and Liveries, then they abolished that. Then you had, and so that's where you went, you had to actually sue out your livery and say, you know what, I am of age, I can prove it. Here you go, present whatever evidence and, proof of life, proof of age, proof of competency, all these things, and you sued your guardian specifically to get your estate. Well, here's the dubious, deceitful underhandedness that happened right after, and you can actually see it in a linear progression. So they get rid of the Court of Wards and Liveries, and now simultaneously to this happening, you have Oliver Cromwell. So King Edward, the Longshanks, the one from Braveheart, had expelled the Jews from England for his whatever purposes, okay? Not going to get into that. We're on YouTube, all that stuff. Now, the Jews had stayed expelled from England until Oliver Cromwell led a revolution against King James II and took his head off, right? And then he took control of England like he was a king. And then he let the Jews back in. And then immediately, and I'm not going to point any fingers as to why this might have happened, but London was burnt to the ground, except for the city of London was untouched. That little, you remember the sovereign Roman city-state area, that was untouched. But England was burnt, or London was burnt to the ground. About 70,000 people died. Okay. And then, of course, because they didn't know who was alive and who was not alive, and one would say, isn't that convenient? They were able to pass this to set the KV Act of 1666. So the London fires happened in 1666. And then they had this solution already concocted, ready to go. So let's get into it. This is what's still screwing us today, guys. All right. John Best, we got John in the house. Good to see you, man. And he says, an alleged law became void by the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Was replaced by from. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. So if you want to elaborate, but let's get into reading this, okay? Because this is what they're using, and then we're going to get into how this applies in a modern setting, and hopefully we'll get all that in before we reach, I'll say 12:30. All right, let me zoom in on that. Oops, wrong thing. This one. See, and I've just been giving summaries of this stuff, and it's still taking hours. So, an act for redress of inconveniences by want of proof of deceased person, the deceases of persons, which is the death of persons beyond the seas or absenting themselves. Now, what this document doesn't say is that most of London just burned to the ground and 70,000 people died or are presumed dead, right? Beyond the seas or absenting themselves, upon whose lives estates doth depend. Now, so people erroneously say that our government presumes us lost at sea. No, they don't. But what this did was this added to the same doctrine of ecclesiastical probate that the Magna Carta created. This added to it the ability to presume death and abandonment, and then escheat the estate on that presumption because you've never claimed to be alive. And so that's what they're using, is not the set. It is, but it's the precedent that the Set Decay Act introduced into the common law, was that a period of abandonment could be considered a death and allow the state to come in and take it over. Now, there's an added layer of complexity when you take into account that to be bankrupt is also to be legally dead, but we're not going to get into that. Whereas diverse lords of manors and others have granted estates. There we go. It's all of this comes back to your house and your estate, because it's your property and your relationship to it. By lease for one or more life or lives, or else for years, determinable upon one or more life or lives. And it hath often happened that such person or persons for whose life or lives such estates have been granted have gone beyond the seas, or so absented themselves for many years that the lessors and revisioners cannot find out whether such person or persons be alive or dead, by reason whereof such lessors and revisioners have been held out of possession of their tenements for many years after all the lives upon which such estates depend are dead, in regard that the lessors and revisioners, when they have brought actions for the recovery of their tenements, have been put upon it to prove the death of their tenants. So what's going on is, and to a certain degree you can understand. So I'm going to translate this. And so, like, say you're a tenant, right, or you're leasing something, and you disappear, and now you're the person who has leased this to you for, say, like your life. Like, say you have something in fee simple, which is a term of 99 years or more, right? So it's a lifetime estate, and you've just disappeared, but you're supposed to be paying the fee to the lord that owns that whatever's been leased. And they can't get a hold of you. They can't find you, and you're not paying it, but they can't sell it because you have the title to it. It's under your title. You have that fee, right? But they can't find you, right? So this is a contrived problem. The same way, it's the same Hegelian dialectic stuff they do today, but that has a real sensible, like, you can say, okay, well, if that was actually an organic problem and wasn't engineered, yes, and that's an understandable problem. And even though it's been engineered, it's still an understandable problem. And so they had not created any kind of remedy for a lesser or revisioner, which is a leaser, lesser, right? Like somebody who's the one who gives the lease, for being able to either recover their property or the money owed to them for the property that's been sitting there unpaid for however long you've been gone. So that's an old English way of saying, whereas these people are being screwed out of their money because they don't know where you're at, and they can't do anything with the property because it's in your name and they don't know where you're at, right? That's it. That's all they're saying. So all that extra fancy shit. And actually that's the way people are supposed to speak, but that's a whole other thing. So let's get into it. Says, if such person or persons for whose life or lives such estates have been or shall be granted, as aforesaid, shall remain beyond the seas or elsewhere absent themselves in this realm by the space of 7 years altogether, and no sufficient and evident proof be made of the lives of such person or persons respectively, and any action commenced for recovery of such tenements by the lessors or revisioners. In every case, the person or persons upon whose life or lives such estate depended shall be accounted as naturally dead. So essentially what that means, to translate for you guys, is if you're missing for 7 years and no sufficient proof of life has come forth to the court of wards, which is what it ends up being after the Set Decay Act, they reopen the Court of Wards and Liveries, but just call it the Court of Wards, and that's where you go and you prove you're alive, right? So it doesn't escheat to the crown, back to the crown, or back to the original, you know what I mean, lesser. And am I confusing you guys? All capital questions, all capital letter questions, if you have one, right? But anyways, so that's what'll happen if you don't make sufficient proof of life on the record in a court of record at common law. If you don't make sufficient proof of life, your estate is escheated. That is what this right here, right? So then right here, provided always that if any person or persons who shall be evicted out of any lands or tenements by virtue of this act, and afterwards if such person or persons upon whose life or lives such estate or estate shall depend, shall return again from beyond the seas, or shall on proof in any action to be brought for recovery of the same, to be made appear to be living. So to be made appear to be living. That's why you never go into court and you say, I'm alive. You say, I come before this court and have been found to be living, because this is what they are using. So here's two things that cannot be in our current court system in the United States, or really in any other one, Australia, England, doesn't matter. You cannot be living, and you cannot be an executor, because that bumps the judge out of his position as administrator, which he's really just a fucking, that's it. That's all he is. He's not a judge. He's a clerk and a special administrator. That's it. He's not a fucking judge. You know what I mean? He's not. But anyways, if there cannot be a living person in these courts, and there cannot be an administrator or an executor in this court, because there cannot be an executor and an administrator at the same time, and you must be presumed that the heir to the estate must be presumed to be dead or missing, and the person before them is merely property of the estate. The trustee that is part of the estate, charged with taking care of the estate, but not the actual heir. So you are just part of the property of the estate, and you are the collateral, and you are the one charged with performing the obligations that the administrators give you. Okay? Are you guys, how did I do what? What do you mean, Ryan? How did I do what? Oh, how do you do that? That's what we explain on this channel. I don't know how many episodes of mine you've watched, but what you do is you claim your title. You claim title to your estate on the record at common law. And I have an entire 20-page declaration that I'm almost finished with, that other people have used already successfully. And once that's on the record, you send it to all interested parties to your estate, right? Which would be like the IRS, the Secretary of State, the federal Secretary of State, the president, all these people that have interest, and they have 30 days to rebut your claim, which they cannot. What are they going to say? No, you are dead and you are an infant and you're not one of the people. What are they going to say to you? Right? And even before that 30-day time period is up, because nobody can rebut it, once it is on the record, it stands as fact at law, though permanently after 30 days. And then that very same claim that you put on the record, you put as a performance contract as well. And you add in there that if anybody attempts to administer my estate, they agree to be the trustee and put up a $300 million bond in case of fiduciary malfeasance, which a fiduciary is a trustee that can make financial decisions over the estate. And so that puts them in a position that if you attempt to sell any property in my estate or do anything with any part of the property in my estate, you forfeit $300 million. And you also put in there, even if you don't put up the estate, you automatically agree to put the equivalent collateral of your own property in place as a bond. And boom. And once you get that, and then of course there's a power of attorney in there and some other things so that you can sign for them. But this has already worked. And this is the origin of what they are doing 100%. I mean, we'll go back to, if you just recently joined us or what have you, we'll go back to this. Title 1, Title 1, U.S. Code, Section 8, person, human being, child, and individual as including born alive infant. So in statutory construction, anything that is included excludes everything else. So when you see the word including, it means only this. So what is included is at the exclusion of everything else. So what that means is in determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative bureaus and agencies of the United States, the words person, human being, child, and individual shall include every infant member of the species Homo sapiens who is born alive at any stage of development, because they are administering your estate through presumption of infancy. They presume you as the heir to be missing or dead because you've never come within 7 years, just like it says in the Set the KV Act of 16. So you've never come within 7 years to claim your estate or make claim on your estate. So you're presumed to be dead. You were abandoned at the hospital in the first place by your parents who abandoned you by documentation at the foundling hospital. You have never come forth to claim your estate. So you're presumed to be dead. Now the person, the legal person before them is just a piece of property of the state, the equivalent to a servant of the estate, but they call him a trustee. And he's carried out you in that capacity as a U.S. 14th Amendment citizen, which is an entire other layer to this, right? Which is why we're probably going to have to do a part 2, because that's really the way they drove it home. By removing you from your birthright state citizenship into 14th Amendment citizenship, you automatically, by accepting the benefits of privileges known as civil rights from the government, instead of, standing on your own unalienable rights granted by God, you agree to be an infant, which is you become an infant because you're dependent on them for your safety. So now your state is under administration by them and you're dependent on them. Beneficium abstinende is a Roman saying for he who accepts the benefit foregoes the inheritance. And they actually used this back in ancient Rome as a way to get out of paying heavy taxes on an estate. If they were going to inherit a state that was super in debt, they would just say, nah, just be a beneficiary. Just give me a portion of it, but I don't want any controlling interest in it. And you can tell me what to do with the portion that I have. And that way they don't have to pay the debt, right? So the heir, you as the heir presumed dead, you in the courtroom presumed to be a 14th Amendment infant trustee, right? And it says it right here. And you must necessarily be so for the United States Code to even exist in the first place, to the degree that it does now. And what this says is any act of Congress. So anything that each state legislature mirrors from the United States Code, such as like motor vehicle codes and all that stuff, right? They're talking about infants, which goes back to the Magna Carta and the Set the KV Act of 1666. So, let me see. I got a couple questions here now. People are starting to do the capitals. So we got Ryan. I already answered that one. Make Stupid People Famous says, can you email me when you're done with your claim? Yes. Have you emailed me prior to burnthecorporatefiction@yahoo.com? So I have your email address. And if not, then I need you to, and I'll let you know when I'm done. Can we get a copy of your claim? I'm deciding how to disseminate the copy of my claim because you see all the prerequisite information. You cannot use this claim if you do, or you can. This claim will not work if you do not know how to use it, is my point. So you have to be able to stand on it, understand why it works, which is why we're going through this history. But yes, I want to make this available to you guys, and there's no question about that. But I want you to be able to use it properly. It's very powerful. But the moment they smell that you have no idea what you're doing, they're going to capitalize on it. That's how these people work. So you have to understand why it works and what they're doing. Okay, you have to. So the same reason that infant is in the very first section or title of the United States Code, and the same reason that the Magna Carta is the foundation of the Michigan compiled laws right before 1933, the very reason that Michigan created a probate court before they even became a state. This all shows you this is why, because they grandfathered probate in to be able to escheat your estate under presumption and control your will and your property. They give you that they have recreated their feudal system in what is supposed to be an allodial and record keeping republic. But now we have registry. And so they hold the title to it under presumption, and then they allow you to use it as a trustee for their benefit. essentially, right? And they tell you how to use it, and they charge you a fee for using it, and then they charge you fees for misusing it. It's the only way they can do it. All right. So, but yes, I do ultimately want that to be the end result of what we have going on here. Jerry, you said Ryan is a fool, and that includes his dog. That means only Ryan's dog is a fool. Sorry, Ryan's dog, I'm out. Not sure what that means, Jerry. Are you talking about me, or are you talking about somebody else, or what? I'm not really sure what that means. So maybe you can clarify. So did I insult somebody? Did I say something offensive? Or no, I don't know. That was a very unusual reaction. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. So essentially that's, yeah, so this is the main point of the Set Decay v. Act 1666, was to create the precedent that if you have not put forth positive proof of life within 7 years, then you are presumed to be dead. Your estate is escheated to the state or to the crown, depending on where you're at, and is placed under administration, even if you are currently, doing business and talking to people and doing whatever else, right? So, hold on. Jerry Sonamick might have something for us. He says that is the definition of how include is used in legalese. Well, yeah, absolutely. And what is Title I, Section 8? Is that law or is that legalese? That's why I said it that way, right? So include, that is the definition of include in legalese. And that's actually how they use statutory construction to hide the real meaning of the acts that they are passing from you, is because you generally immediately think include means includes this among, its original meaning and other meanings. It includes this. No, include in statutory construction, which is deceptive legalese, means only this. And that's why they do that. And so we're not talking about actual law here when we look at Title I, Section 8. We're talking about legalese. We're talking about United States Code. Right? So let's see here. Moving forward. So this further proves, so this is the Michigan Judicature Act. So this is the Probate Code of 1939. So we'll give a brief synopsis with it. In Magna Carta, various Set Decay v. Acts. Magna Carta allowed them to mix the Roman trust law with common law so that they could create situations where they could escheat the estates of minors or incompetents or anyone who was not capable of managing the property, right, under common law, while also giving us the double-edged sword of creating a trial by jury. And if you do know how to use the law, then the Magna Carta will create a free society, but it allows the free society to create a slave society out of those who do not know how to use the law. And that's why I call it a double-edged sword. And so that's what the Magna Carta did. The various Set Decay, there's many other things that happen in between, but the Set Decay v. Acts essentially created the precedent within that same system where if you have not given a positive proof of life and you are presumed to be dead and your property escheats to the estate, or sheets to the state, right? And then we move a little bit further. And so now this whole system of probate that's been going on since before 1215 is grandfathered into the United States. And we're going to take some look at, so we'll go to this Organic Act, the Organic Acts of the Territories. This is the Northwest Ordinance of Ohio. So this same stuff that's put forth in the Magna Carta is mirrored right here in the very territories that ended up becoming states. And we're going to take a look at that for a few moments. It says, be it ordained by the United States and Congress assembled that the said territory for the purposes of temporary government be one district, subject, however, to be divided into two districts, blah, 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 right? As future circumstances may, in the opinion of Congress, make it expedient, right? So look at the very first thing they begin talking about. This is the second paragraph of this ordinance. Be it ordained by the authority aforesaid that the estates both of resident and non-resident proprietors in the said territory dying intestate, who knows what dying intestate means? Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat right now if you know. Dying intestate shall descend to and be distributed among their children. So this is before they implemented all their probate garbage, right? So it was automatically, so under a free society without ecclesiastical shackles, it went to the next of kin by virtue of common law, right? So it says, shall descend to and be distributed among the children and the descendants of a deceased child in equal parts, the descendants of a deceased child or grandchild, to take the share of their deceased parent, etc. So the whole thing is about the inheritance of estate and what's to be done with property and estates who die intestate and protecting the people because they haven't become a state yet. And we've just, you know what I mean? Recently won the war for independence and the War of 1812. And so now we are, trying to make sure that people really feel like they fought for something. But then we go back over here, and this is 1827, and boom, they immediately start counteracting what the Organic Acts say. I said that the court of probate shall be held in each of the several counties in this territory, that there shall be some able and learned person appointed to each said counties as judge of the said courts, respectively, for the taking the probate of wills, granting administration on the estates of persons deceased, having been inhabitants of the residence. You know what I mean? So they immediately start introducing their probates, but before they introduced the probate court, it just moved according to the natural progression of where did it go? Where did it disappear on me? To ordinary common law minus the ecclesiastical bullshit. So they had to grandfather that in, but they made certain not to put it in these organic documents so that when you look back, you're never going to go, most people are never going to go back and look through the historical okay, that makes me feel better, Jerry. He says, no, please read above. You're great. Well, I appreciate that, man. I don't know about being great, but I just thought you're mad at me for a second. So, but they before they introduced their ecclesiastical bullshit, they had to put this in the organic document because when most people look back in history, they're not going to look at the public acts and statutes of Michigan in 1827 like me, a weirdo, obviously will go do. You're just going to look at your main documents, if you even go that far, like the ordinance of the Northwest Ordinance or the Declaration of Independence, or, you're probably not even going to look at the Magna Carta. So most people are never going to put this stuff together. They super shadow ban me because I do put this stuff together. And this is what you got going on here. So let me show you guys something else a little interesting. And then I think as we come up on 12 o'clock, this is just going to have to be a part one because there's still so much stuff to go through. And I told you guys I was going to keep it in short, digestible increments of time. So this is the Michigan Judicature Act of 1914. So who knows what happened the year before this act was passed? Anybody? Go ahead and put it in the chat. And if you're watching at home after this is live streamed, if you don't know, you're about to find out. But questions are the best way to learn, because if I just tell you something, it sounds like blah, 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 blah. But if I ask you a question, it forces you to process the question, think about it. And then when I give you the answer, you actually digest it. And so what happened the year before 1914 was the creation. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Jekyll Island, make stupid people famous. On it again, dude. Nailing it. And it was the creation of the Federal Reserve. Okay. And so immediately, and the Federal Reserve is the primary utility, the primary weapon used to take control of the estates through debt and permanently enslave the estates through debt. And that's a very simplified way of putting it. And I can't explain it much more elaborately and have many times, but for the sake of brevity, we're just going to leave it at that. So this is the Michigan Judicature Act of 1914, I believe is the very first one on here. Organization of powers. No, maybe this isn't it. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Where's it? Judicature Act at? Bear with me because I have it. Thought that was it. Maybe I put it earlier in the stream. Office of to prepare bills. You know what? I'll just open it again because I have it right here on my lovely SD card that I finally am able to use again. So we'll do Michigan Judicature Act. You guys are going to shit when you see this. Watch. Yeah, 1914. There it is. So we'll go to that. And then close. No, don't close that. Minimize that. Bring this over to this window here. And why not? We'll put it there. And then so now, let me see if you guys are seeing what I'm saying. Okay. Yep. So I guess that was the right one. So what they're trying to do is this is a, what they said is, whoops, definitely not the right window here. We're going to zoom in. Okay. So commission to prepare bills for the revision and consolidation of statutes. So let me give you guys a brief, just a brief summary, and then I'm going to open up and see if anybody wants to hop on for a second before we close down part one of this. But so let me give you a brief synopsis of the jurisdictions of law. So common law is the underlying law founded on divine law. As we see, that's why England in the Magna Carta had to start a church. That's why the Magna Carta is the foundation of all law in the United States. And that's what allowed us to not have to have a specific denomination or any kind of open confession of a church, of having a church or our laws coming from a church in our documents, is because they were grandfathered in under the Magna Carta, which was commonly known as the foundation and now concretely known, thanks to what I've presented, like the Michigan Compiled Laws in 1929, as the concrete foundation of what's going on. So that's the law, common law. And what is common law? Common law, as we read in the very beginning from a treatise on the law of American administration, is do not violate anyone else's will and do not mismanage property. Essentially, if you're not capable of managing your own property, or you're an infant or a spendthrift or a lunatic or distracted person, and they can take your property, all that stuff. That was introduced by the Magna Carta, but for the last 800 years, it's been common law because of the Magna Carta. And there's very little known about exactly how common law operated prior, because it was never written. It was only spoken. All right, so that's the original jurisdiction. Now, how do you end up outside of common law? Contract. It's the only way. So equity, there's 5 jurisdictions of American jurisprudence. And if you do not know what they are, go watch my show on the 5 jurisdictions of American jurisprudence. They are common law, it's the very foundation. Equity, which is the settlement of contracts, and it's not as rigid as common law, but it's also not controlled by the people. It's controlled by the chancellor or an equity judge nowadays, right? But we even in Michigan had a chancellor at one point. They immediately set that up. Same reason they set up a probate court, right? They want to be able to, we want to only focus on contracts. We don't want to worry about actual law. We want to remove everybody from the organic, the natural law, the common law, and place them into contractual law so that we can bury the common law and take control of the people. That was the whole point. So equity is the enforcement of contracts. Now, from the founding of this country, the judicial branch was given jurisdiction, law, and equity. Well, from the ratification of the deceptive Constitution anyway, but law and equity. Then you enter admiralty, which of course was also part of the founding of this country. And that's primarily what the United States Company operated in, right? And dealing with international law and other countries, international business between the states. This is admiralty. And this was introduced during I believe the 14 or 1500s by one of the King Edwards. I want to say King Edward II introduced admiralty, and he got it from some, we'll do a show on that because I don't want to misspeak. But anyways, these are all relatively recent jurisdictional creations, by the way, is why I bring that up. And then, so admiralty, and then you have ecclesiastical jurisdiction, right? Which is the one that we have all come under presumption. And then you have military jurisdiction. So out of equity, admiralty, ecclesiastical, and military, 3 out of 4 of those you have to enter into a contract to be subject to them. You have to, because the default jurisdiction is common law. The default jurisdiction is common law, unless you're under contract. But like I said, 3 out of 4 of those. Okay. Now, the one you do not have to enter into a contract to come under is ecclesiastical law or probate, also known as probate. They can bring you under this without ever even telling you through presumption. And if you are indeed a minor or an infant or incompetent, then you probably won't notice. Now, this is what Michigan specifically, I despise these scumbags from the beginning. Absolutely. Because I see, as I read their old laws, that they absolutely intended on escheating the estates of everyone except the rich inbred oligarch cocksuckers that exist in this state, right? And then enslaving them all in some sort of benevolent corporate tax chattel venture, which I'm now stuck in myself, right? Just like the rest of you. And, by the way, a 401k is just a private Social Security. It's all the same shit. It's just a private, smaller Social Security trust account, and the corporation does the same shit with the 401k that the government does with Social Security. They borrow against it. They use it as a line of equity, all sorts of stuff, right? Fuck these rich scumbags. But on top of that, let me not get too extreme, right? In my a little radical there, right? I got a little riled up. I'm sorry, guys. My bad. I get a little passionate about this because they piss me off, dude. They intended to do it the entire time. They created the probate court before they even became a state. They're like, oh yeah, we gotta get that probate in there, boy. So we can go ahead and start taking the property of the common folk now, right? Yeah, because we're gonna need all that in order to make you corporate tax chattel. Right? Because you're going to be dependent. Ooh, another thing I just learned, that the YMCA was actually a psyop to get farmers to come out of the farms. We're going to do a show on that. It's very interesting. So they started luring farmers out of off their farms into the cities with the ideas of, for a manufacturing job lifestyle and a fake middle class ideal, and got all these people dependent on the corporations through manufacturing jobs while depriving them of life skills that would have kept them independent from the corporate cocksuckers in the first place. These people have planned this the whole time. The only way you can be free is if you're self-sufficient. So let me get into this. Then I'm going to open up, and then I'm going to have to do a part 2 to finish the rest of the stuff I wanted to get into tonight. But we're definitely going to have to do a part 2. If you guys want a part 2, if it bored you or was too difficult to understand, let me know. For sure. But so here's what I find interesting is hold on, let me see. Let me read it for a second, find the exact spot. Here we go. So they talk about why the commission was created, whatever. So in preparation of this bill here, I'm going to put this at the top if you guys cannot read this. And if you guys cannot read it, listen to me, because in the preparation of this bill, we have had in mind certain primary objects. This is the Michigan Judicature Act. Okay, so these Michigan judges, right, and how they want to change the courts. To give heed to the constitutional mandate to the legislator to abolish as far as practicable distinctions between law and equity proceedings. So they want to break down the wall between the actual law, common law, and equity, which is basically the enforcement of private conscience and private law. And see, they don't expect the average reader to understand that. Only a lawyer is going to understand it. They just told you to simplify, or it says to give heed to the constitutional mandate to the legislature to abolish as far as practicable distinctions between law and equity proceedings, which first of all shows you two things: that I know what the hell I'm talking about when I'm talking about separate jurisdictions, and secondly, that law and equity are not the same fucking thing. But what we have today is this: Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 2. One form of action, right? And what is that? the civil action. Civil law is the antithesis to common law. Civil law is equity. Common law is law. Civil law is contracts and also administration of your property by an emperor or king or whoever, right? Or your boss, right? Common law is the law, but here we go, one form of action. So here, and then we have also, if we do this, we'll make another distinction. The Constitution, right? Why not? Let's just pull up any copy. Doesn't matter because I know what the hell I'm doing here. So we're going to go down to Article 3, Section 2, fellas. Ladies and gents, rather. Right? Oops, Article 4 went a little far. Article 3, nope. Was that Article 4? Oh, Article 3, Section 2. Here you go. So we'll zoom in on this so you guys can see it. And this is what created the judicial branch of government. The judicial power, right here, shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this guy. So law and equity are not the same thing, but what they did here was made everything equity. It says this rule modifies USC Title 28, former Section 384, suits in equity when not sustainable. The whole idea is to bury common law. And so this takes us back to why I covered the final experiment and all of that, right? Is because in order to bury common law, they have to remove you from biblical cosmology and a relationship with your creator, because that is the entirety of what common law is founded upon. I mean, shit, what else can I show you guys real quick? Let's, before I open it up, not that, we're looking for the, yeah, you know what? Yeah, it might be the Constitution of Illinois. Yep, here you go. Look at this. The very first Constitution of Illinois. And it says that all men, right here, Section 3, that all men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God. Look how they wrote that, according to the dictates of their own consciences. They'd never write that like that today. No man can of right be compelled to attend, blah, 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 but Almighty God, okay? Worship Almighty God. Monotheism. Not just, whatever you believe as long as you have a faith. Monotheism, right? Secondly, I'll show you the best Bill of Rights. Actually, let me get back to the Michigan. I'm starting to do my bounce around thing. Let me get back to the Michigan Judicature. Then we'll look at the Virginia Bill of Rights. And in the meantime, I'm going to put a link in the chat, see if anybody pops up in the meantime. And if not, then I am going to shut it down shortly after this because I cannot be up all night. But we will do a part 2. Paste. Here you go, for you guys. Yeah, he's absolutely right. Make stupid people famous says, my spirit screams in duress knowing that my alleged state ID is a graven image in violation of Yah's second commandment. So, but, that's a little too much for a lot of people. So we're going to try to keep it light links to the spiritual, because I don't even know how anybody can study this and not actually come to the understanding of that. It's just like the treaty said, the treatise on law of administration, for the sphere of the law is the spiritual. And you're thinking, oh, it's just a treatise. Well, listen, what a treatise is, the authoritative text on any subject. And necessarily the first 50 to 100 pages of a treaty contain just the citings of the case law they used to write it in the first place. 50 to 100 pages of just small print case laws that this lawyer studied to write this book. For the sphere of the law is the spiritual. It operates upon and through the will alone. And what is the will? Will is realized as property. What is property? It's your estate. What is your property controlled by? Your house. What is your relationship to your property? Your status, your status. Do you have absolute title, or does somebody else? If somebody else has title to your estate, then they control your will. It's that simple, guys. That fucking simple. And then everybody looks and goes, this satanic organ, these people are devil worshipers, and everybody commonly knows that this is a satanic plot, but they don't. Then when it gets into this, be like, oh, well, you're just reading a little too much into that. No, I'm not at all. That is exactly how the law works. And if you knew law, right, instead of just being some charlatan, then you would understand this. It's very simple. So back to the Michigan Judicature Act. Then we're going to go to one other thing. If anybody wants to pop on here, I've got a link in the comments, not on the Rumble side, on the YouTube side, just because I'm not sure how many people are watching on. You know what? I'll go over there. I'll post it on there. Why not? See who we got over here. Yeah, we got some people over here. Look, echo. Let's see if I can pop it in there real quick. Paste. All right, if you guys want to pop in, yep, I got it over there. So it's in the comments on Rumble. It's in the comments on YouTube. And let's get back to this Michigan Judicature Act because I got just a little bit more to cover there. And so, whoops, right here. So to simplify, to give heed to constitutional mandate to the legislature to abolish as far as practicable distinctions between law and equity proceedings. So get rid of common law is what that means. To simplify procedure wherever simplification is possible without making it uncertain and doubtful. Well, no, that's exactly what you did by blending the jurisdictions. See, the attorney did this the whole time through the 100 and whatever years it took him to 150 years it took him to subvert the common law. That's what he kept saying. We're trying to make it simple. We can't have all of these various jurisdictions bouncing around, and we want just one type of attorney to be able to operate in law in general, instead of you having to have a common law attorney for this, an admiralty attorney for, or I'm sorry, you don't have common law attorney, it's lawyer, because attorney means to transfer homage or service from one person to another. So, you know, instead of having a common law lawyer for this, an admiralty lawyer for that, blah, 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 we want to just simplify it, make it one, oh, you guys are going to love the term, uniform procedure, right? So now what do we have? Uniform Commercial Code. Administrative Procedures Acts under Uniform Commercial Code. You know what I mean? I can teach you guys how to get out of the system, but you have to learn how you're in it first before, once I show you the solution, you'll be like, oh, that makes sense. Because if you don't learn all of the chains that they have on you, then you won't understand how what I'm writing and what other people have written will get you out of those chains. And then so when they try to pull on those chains and tug on those chains, you're not going to know how to fucking be like, oh, that chain isn't there. So you're not tugging on anything. And in fact, if you keep trying to tug at my pant leg, I'm going to sue the shit out of you. That's how you do it. You guys get what I'm saying? So, you know, anyways, to make the attainment of a final decision less less expensive and more expeditious. That, well, you failed there. Oh, wait. Unless they meant less expensive for the state. That would make sense. To eliminate obsolete and contradictory provisions. See this right here. There are no obsolete or contradictory provisions in the common law. If the common law contradicts what you're trying to do, then what you're trying to do in equity or anywhere else is unlawful, you piece of shit. You see what I'm saying? You guys get it? All right, but I could go on and on, but you see this right here in 1914, they expressed their desire to get rid of the common law, which you cannot get rid of it, but they want to bury it. They want you to forget about it. And that's the point of it. And all of this is merely an expression of the probate jurisdiction created by the Magna Carta. And that's all they're doing. So the funny thing is the very system they're using to administer your estate as a 14th Amendment citizen, which I'm going to get into on part 2, is spiritual. It's a spiritual thing. It's based on, it's ecclesiastical. It was started by priests, but they want you to believe that there is no natural law or divine law, common law. It's absolutely asinine. So if you guys want me to do a part 2, I'm going to go into one more document because it's getting a little late. And if you guys want me to do a part 2 to go into how the 14th Amendment citizen, the Civil War, how they've escheated the estates, the zone improvement program and all that, and how what I've explained tonight has actually been put forth in the United States, let me know in the comments. Let me know in the chat. Okay, make stupid people famous as part 2. Right on. Cool. Let me know in the chat. Let me know in the comments. But we're going to go into one last document. And since nobody has joined, we'll probably shut it down after that. But that document is going to be the Virginia. Is this? Hold on. Yeah, I think this is it. Yep. Okay, cool. Perfect. So this is the Virginia Constitution, right? The original Virginia Constitution. Oh, wait. Ooh, never mind. I pulled up the wrong one because they put 1902 as amended. Oh, man. Liberty of a citizen embraces not only the right to God. Oh, okay. Well, I have to pull up. I was trying to find the original one on Hayti Trust, but it's really, really hard to find. I've shown it on older episodes, so it actually exists, and it's a real thing. But basically, you cannot deprive your posterity. That's deceptive, though. This is supposed to be, look at this. This is the this is the revised statutes of Virginia from 1819, and they didn't put the original Constitution with the original Bill of Rights in there because that's a problem for them. It says you cannot deprive your posterity of their right to property. So they just put the 1902 Bill of Rights in there, and yeah, that's so deceptive. That's the type of shit that they do, though. It's ridiculous because, and I was looking for that. I didn't think to look for it until about a half hour before we started the stream. But I had it on my old computer bookmarked under this Hayti Trust. And it's really, really, really hard to find. So you know what? Maybe I'll find it and I'll screenshot what I'm trying to show you guys. It says you cannot deprive your posterity of their right to property, which is based on divine law and common law. And I'll screenshot it and put it in the community for you guys so you guys have it. So you know know what I'm talking about here. But anyway, without further ado, we have reached about 2 hours and 21 minutes. And so we'll keep this short, digestible, go through this, decide what your questions are, what I need to address in my next video. And I also was considering doing something like this. I'm thinking about doing a morning. So I work third shift. People who watch this show know that I work third shift. And I was thinking about doing a morning news coverage type of program where I apply the lens of actual knowledge of the law to propagandistic bullshit that's going on in our current events and in our daily lives, basically, and just kind of have like maybe an hour in the mornings, three or four times a week. If you guys would like that, let me know. I'm going to probably give it a shot, but my Saturday nights or Friday nights are going to be reserved for law. So just go through this stuff, what questions you have, where I need to kind of zone in on more for you to understand this as the origin of their system of enslavement. And then as far as the remedy, which is the declaration of title and claim of the estate, I am almost finished with it. And I don't necessarily want to just put it out like for anybody to grab, because first of all, there's agents, there's people that are going to misuse it. There's people that are going to not know how to use it and essentially basically work against it in a psychological operation type of way, where it's like, oh, we've got these people doing, there's a lot of things. It's powerful stuff, right? It's very powerful stuff. So we're going to try to decide, maybe we'll create there's got to be some way that I know you guys are serious about wanting to learn it and wanting to actually put it into action. You know what I mean? Because I can't have any half measures on the people that are trying to do this stuff at all. And that's my personal opinion. Well, no, it's actually what I know. So we'll work on that. And we are going to figure out, or maybe we can do like a generalized template where it's not entirely specific, but it gets the points down. And then people have to do a certain amount of research to flesh. I don't know. It's tough because you can't just give stuff like this out to the average person who might fuck it up, if you know what I mean. And that's kind of the point. And it has already worked. It has proven success track record. So we'll figure it out. Let me look through a few of the comments. And Earth Goat Trust. Listen, I'm gonna find that Virginia one again. I had it on my old computer, and it was from I want to say it's 1819, but my problem might be 1817. But yeah, it has their original Bill of Rights. And that is damning to Virginia, which is now a Commonwealth. So it's property of England. And yeah, we'll get that. We'll get that for you. Let's see here. We'll go up a little bit. Yeah, as soon as you have knowledge, that's absolutely correct, Mike. As soon as you have the knowledge, exactly. I don't want anybody getting hurt, and you need to know what you're doing out there. So Scott says part 2 for sure. I will, George. I will do a part 2. Mike says part 2. Absolutely. Hold the Line says definitely a part 2, but maybe you can go into how they use. Well, yeah, I can do that right now. So the way that they create traffic tickets, so your driver's license and your license plate are both connected to your estate and to the trust, your Social Security trust. And so basically they use the Social Security trust as collateral to generate what a traffic ticket is essentially it's a coupon, or it's an investor security. So they can sell the traffic ticket as a discount or at a discount, and then secure your compliance to repaying it. And what did it cost them in the first place? Some guy writing on a piece of paper. That's the whole thing. Did that make sense to you or no? Just let me know if it did, if in the comments or whatever. Yep, it says that's the plan. New show sounds good, Bullet says. So I'm thinking when I get off work in the mornings, I might just come home and we might just go through some might go through some stuff on X, might go through some stuff wherever, whatever you guys might have that you want to talk about or my take on, or you have a take on it, you want to come out. We'll figure it out though. But I plan on doing that next week, actually, starting probably Monday or Tuesday morning. Hold the Line says the thing. Third shift life, bro. Graveyard, right? It's rough. All right. Well, let's see here. We got. Just looking through your comments, seeing how do you prove what I said to you? Well, so here's the thing. They're never going to admit to it. You can prove it, and we can go through that on that is a longer conversation. I have actually expressed that, but essentially what you want to do is you don't want to necessarily prove what they're doing. What you want to do is make them prove that they can. And so you challenge their jurisdiction. You don't want to prove what they're doing. You just want to prove that they can even have you there in the first place by challenging their jurisdiction. So I come before the court having been found to be living, and I am the sole heir and executor of the res defendant estate, and I have no contracts with the state. So I'm here by special appearance to settle this matter. Why am I here? That's it. Why am I here? That's it. That's all you do. After you say all the other things I said, because remember, when you say I come before the court having been found to be living, you cannot be living and be in that court, because that court is only for estates and trusts, essentially widely held fixed investment trusts. And then you say, and I am the sole heir and executor. So the heir, you are now the living heir of the estate they're trying to administer. And when you say that you're the executor, there cannot be an executor and an administrator at the same time. So you completely knock them off of their. Then if you have to get into further challenging, you say, okay, well, I have the right to know the nature and the cause of the charges against me and a right to face my accuser. That's a common law right. It's a constitutional right. And you say, so what type of court is this? Is it criminal or civil? And they say criminal if it's traffic generally, but it doesn't carry a penalty of jail. And then you say, okay, well, if it's criminal, is it an Article 1, Section 8 tribunal, or is it an Article 3, Section 2 common law court? They can't answer these questions without fucking themselves. That's how you get them. You always want to ask. You never want to prove what they're doing by stating what they're doing. What you want to do is get them to prove that they can do it. Does that make sense? Hold the line. So, and yeah, I agree with you. You need to be superior to a degree, but never be a person. You never want to be a person. Remember, the Constitution starts with we the people. The 14th Amendment starts with all persons. Very big difference. Yes, that's exactly it. Just make them. He who makes the statement holds a burden of proof. So never make any statements. Ask questions based on what you know to be true, and force them to prove it. And when they cannot, then they'll dismiss or they'll get pissed and adjourn, or whatever they'll end up doing. And there's a whole other avenue that we can go through once you claim your estate, and it's called an at-law counterclaim. And you can go right down to the county clerk. You can file your declaration of trespass on the case and serve them with a writ, then file your declaration, right? And then when you file their declaration, you can literally usurp the power of their court. But that's a whole entire show. And I've already done one. If you want to look at my old show, Supreme Court of Record or Superior Court of Record, The Real Power of the People or something like that, I named it, and check that show out. And I really go in depth and was working with somebody who, again, which is why I'm rethinking how I do this, who lost, no offense, Mojo, but you didn't take it seriously. You had them on the ropes and you didn't give a shit. You didn't do the things I told you to do. So, and that's why we need you're not always going to get wins, but we need only soldiers that are willing to do what they have to do on this channel. And that's why we have to maybe create like some sort of Discord or some sort of small, or maybe we just create like a cheap membership platform or something like this, to where we can get people who actually show that they're a little serious, or you know what I mean? At least just a little serious enough to where you're a little invested to get me to be able to actually be your special master and teach you how to do this. And special master is the equivalent of a counselor, in common law, basically. Is like I can actually draft things for you and help you and show you how to do things. But that's a road way later to cross. I need you guys to understand the basis of this first, and in the chains that they have. And so as soon as you guys start being able to contribute to the conversation, I mean, you guys do contribute greatly. But when you guys start contributing in a way where you're like, yeah, so what if we try this? And it's based on the understanding that everything is the administration of your estates, then I know I'm like, okay, that's good. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And you guys will think of things that I did not think of. It takes all of us is what it's going to take. I mean, I've already spent so much time and energy and effort over so many years to learn this stuff. And, there's no way one person can know everything. So, but it does take a lot of time, effort, and energy. So, anyways, yeah, RF is killing us softly. Yes, you are a little late. I tried to stall at the beginning of the show, see if more people will show up. Now we have a good crowd. So if you're interested in the actual meat of the document, watch the first part, or the presentation, watch the first part where I go through a treatise on the law of administration. Probably skip through a little bit where I'm just kind of trying to stall, and then the rest of it's pretty good content. So, all right, guys. Well, without further ado, I appreciate you guys being here. As always, I love being able to share this information with you, and I love that you're interested in it, and I hope that you continue to study it, because there's a well-known saying, or a well-known quote that says, James Madison was asked what type of government is it that you've given us, and he said, a republic if you can keep it. But a lesser-known version of that quote says, George Washington was standing nearby, and he said, in order to keep it, every man must know the law. And you can only really ever understand how true that is once you know the law. You cannot be free and not know the law. That's it. You cannot be a peer. You cannot be a sovereign. You cannot be above administration if you do not know the law. You have to be able to operate in the same way that a king would operate. I mean, except for without being probably an evil douchebag. But, you get what I'm saying. So, you guys have a fantastic evening. I will check my email for sure. And I will get back to you as soon as I'll let you know that I got it. And then I'll definitely get back to you once I finish. And I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. I just got it put back on the day before yesterday. I actually thought that I lost it and was incredibly pissed off, but I was able to recover it. So that's a story for another time. But you guys have a fantastic evening. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you, probably Monday morning. If you guys want the news show, we'll give it a shot this week. Why not? Let's see how it goes, right? What's worse that could happen? It sucks and we just stop doing it. Who cares, right? All right. Have a good one, guys. I will see you Monday morning.